Hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about how to prune houseplants. Houseplants have become so popular these days. In fact, they're very popular in my own home. I've got probably over 20 different types of houseplants now, and I couldn't be happier to have them in my home. It brings a certain sense of feeling of bringing that outdoors, that greenery in. It really helps boost your mental wellness, and it keeps you active, and especially in like an office space. So if you've got an office, if you've got a home setting, maybe a home office, lots of us have home offices these days, but even just if you just enjoy gardening, and sometimes, we hit this January, February time frame, the winter time frame, but really year round, houseplants add a lot of value to your indoor decor, and your look and your overall well-being. They're just great to have around. So, most importantly is how to keep them healthy and how to keep them good looking. And then also, I find it to be a lot of fun to be able to prune my houseplants. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's just a general overall quick kind of how to prune your houseplants. There's 4 main reasons why we would prune a houseplant, and we'll get to those in just a second. But what I always like to start off with is timing. So timing is essential when we talk about pruning, especially if we're talking about like outdoor pruning. We're talking about pruning trees, shrubs, perennials, even annuals. When do you want to do that? Houseplants kind of vary a little bit, but typically overall, I always recommend pruning kind of in that late winter, early spring time frame. So around February, March for the Hampton Roads area. Depends on where, everywhere, if you're watching this from a different location in the United States, you can always check out your last frost date. That's kind of what I go by. So our last frost date here in the Hampton Roads area is right around April 15th, April 10th, somewhere in that general range. So we know that plants are going to start growing after that, and maybe even a little bit before that. So the sun starts to get a little bit closer, starts to get a little bit higher in the sky, the days get longer. All of those things will aid in your plants growing more. So as we get more sunlight and longer days, that'll really, really help. So we want to make sure that we're pruning around that time frame, because if you prune heavily, like if we're going to prune to revive a plant, which I'll show you, then you want to make sure that if you're taking a lot of foliage off the plant, that it has enough time to regenerate new growth, or has a little bit of time before it starts to regenerate new growth. So if you prune going into winter, when we know that the plants aren't going to put any new growth out, then that can be detrimental to the plant. Now, everyday cleaning, which is what I'm going to show you as well, pruning for health is what I call that, for that overall health and vigor of the plant, then that you would probably, you're going to do that year round. So that's going to be one of the first ones we're going to talk about. So really kind of varies, really can do it almost all year round, but specifically if we're doing kind of something kind of drastic to the plant and we're going to cut it a little bit harder than maybe normal, then you typically want to at least do that at least right around that February, March time frame in the Hampton Roads area. 2 to 3 to 4 weeks before our last frost date is always a good judgment call. But if you're going to prune a little bit harder and you got a sunroom, you got a heated space, you got grow lights, things like that, then you can really do it year round. Just kind of depends. And what I always tell people is ask your garden center experts. So if you live locally, you want to come in and check out our garden center experts, our houseplant experts, because they can tell you specifically about each plant, when to prune it and how to prune it. So we're going to kind of do an overall, general kind of discussion here today. So let's talk about tools, because every time I go to do a garden project, I always think about what do I need? So I have it all there. It makes everything a lot easier, especially if I need to pop into the garden center and pick up anything. So it's really, really good to kind of make sure that you have a list of things that you might need. So what are we going to maybe need today? Well, we're going to need pruners for sure. So we'll talk about pruners here in a second. I'll show you all the different styles and options that you have in pruners. But you also might need a pair of gloves. Some people have different reactions to plants. I don't typically get a lot of reactions, but it's always nice to have a pair of gloves, especially if we're getting really close. They can kind of protect your skin a little bit, especially if you're using a sharp pair of pruners. It's not going to prevent anything drastic from happening, but it does give you a little bit of a safety measurement there as well as some plants, drip sap. Some people have different reactions to it. So having a pair of gloves handy is definitely a good thing to do. And then of course, plant food. So we're going to probably feed our plants maybe in this time frame, and I'll talk about kind of different options there. In the image over there, we've just got a traditional granular plant food that you would use, but you might use Super Thrive. I'll show you those here. So let's talk about pruners real quick and the different styles, because there's so many different choices out there, and I love all of them, and I love having a huge array of pruners, because I can use them for so many different things. So having a lot of different options is a great one. But the most important tool that any pruner will need is a pair of bypass pruners. Now, bypass pruners are pretty much the only pruner you'll ever find here. Bypass pruners mean they pass each other. So the actual anvil part of a pruner, so if you got an anvil pruner, those are old. Typically only florists use them. You don't really use them for gardening necessarily. You can use it to cut dead wood because it doesn't matter, but anvils have a flat side and the blade is flat and it goes into it. So you get a bigger crush point basically. So the blade's gonna start to cut, but then it's gonna start to crush on the anvil side. I'd show you, but I don't even sell any anvil pruners. So bypass pruners are what you definitely are gonna want. Bypass pruners are just like scissors. So if you've ever used a pair of scissors, that's what you want. You want it to pass through. So let's see if you can see that. So it passes by. Now, this is just a normal pair of bypass pruners. This is a Felco. Felcos are probably the top of the line. I do lots and lots of pruning, so of course I invested in these and I make sure that I keep them safe and sound. I always have them kind of in a protector that I can always kind of keep around, so that's kind of nice. But this is an investment. They run right around $100, $120. This is the F2s. They are bigger. They make some for smaller hands, so there's lots of different options for pruners. But this is a really nice one. So if you're going to be doing lots of pruning, especially indoors and outdoors, then this is a great one to have. You can also just get a inexpensive pair. I always have some of these around as well, because sometimes you're just going out, you're going to prune some stuff and maybe a little rainstorm passes by and you're like, oh, and you leave them outside. Well, you're not going to invest a ton of money in these. I think these are right around $14.99, $19.99, so you can get them pretty inexpensively, but almost the exact same setup as these. So they've just got a latching system down here at the bottom, and it's super simple to use, and bypass pruners are great to have. So if you're not real good about keeping your pruners, clean or out of the rain, or those types of things, get yourself an inexpensive pair, because if they rust and they fall apart, you can always pick up another pair, a year or two later. But you might also want some different tools, some specific tools, some specialty tools. And so one of them is a household shear. Household shears are really great, especially when we're pruning, foliage. We're doing a little light pruning. So these are just basically a little bit of a heavy duty scissor is all that really is. So really nice thing to have around as a nice pair of sharp household shears, because those will come in handy from time to time. And then one of my favorite pruners is the Houseplant pruner. So this is made by Bergen & Ball, and I'll show it to you here in a second so you can get that glare off that. But Bergen & Ball makes some of the best tools out there. And this is a houseplant pruner. The thing I love about it is it's small. So if you've got smaller hands, but even if you just need something kind of tiny that you just like to kind of work with and feel like you're getting a little bit more fine, a little bit more precise, this is a great one. But what's really cool about this one is the curved blade. So you can see that curved blade there. So what that does is when you go into a plant, you can close it. So we close it, we go into a plant, and then you can open it up. And what that does is help part your plant, especially when you're working with bushier plants like aglaonemia or a peace lily. This is a great option to kind of get in there, get to the center, and not damage the surrounding good foliage that you want to avoid. So I love these guys. These are really, really handy. And then tons of people love these, and I do too. But these are the Dram, the compact shear by Dram. Dram makes about 3 different types of these, but this is one of my favorites because of that really, really fine needle point. So you can see that right there. It's a really, really nice little needle point there. So really easy to get in there. Great for like bonsai. A lot of people use them for bonsai. A lot of people use them to harvest vegetables if they've got a vegetable garden. So lots and lots of different uses for these, and lots of different pruners. I didn't even bring all of them in. We've probably got another 10 different types that you could use for different things. For terrariums, we've got terrarium pruners, we've got bonsai shears, lots and lots of different options when it comes to pruners. But getting a nice pair of pruners, I think, is a good option, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of pruning. So gloves, any kind of everyday kind of gardening glove is really nice. I like these little tight ones, these nitrile ones. These are nice because it gives you the ability to kind of grab things and not have to worry about, too thick of gloves. If you're working out in the yard, you might want some thicker gloves to keep warm, especially in the winter season. But these are nice as well. So these are just a little bamboo series, a little bit nice, softer fabric. But these also give you the ability to kind of grab things and use your pruners and not have to feel like you've got something clunky on your hands. And then, of course, plant food. So whenever we do a prune on our plants, we might not feed them right away. It depends on the time of the year, and that's why I always recommend talking to your garden center experts, especially when it comes to houseplants, because they all like to be fed at different times slightly. But generally speaking, when they're growing is when they need to be fed. You typically don't want to feed them going into a winter season, because plants even indoor plants aren't going to grow much in the winter. Now, if you've got grow lights and you've got a heated room, or you've got something, like a sunroom that gets a good amount of light, things like that, then you might see growth throughout the year. But typically you don't want to feed, because if a plant, even a tropical plant, an indoor plant, is going to go into dormancy, it's going to go into a period of where it's not going to grow much, and you give it a plant food, it's going to force it to do something that it doesn't necessarily want to do. So let me show you a couple options. We love our green leaf, of course. Green leaf is our plant food. We've got two formulations. We've got an organic and a traditional. And this is really what we love to use on our houseplants here at the Garden Center, because you see instant results. It lasts for about 2 to 3 months. So it's a nice slow feed. It's kind of like a time release food. So kind of similar to like an Osmocote. Osmocote's not bad either. Osmocote is a 6-month release, which I think is a little too long. It's like a little bit of food over a long period of time. This one gives you a nice little boost right at the beginning, and then it keeps it going for about another 2 to 3 months. And of course, anything in a container is going to lose the plant food a little bit faster. So almost all your plants, houseplants, are going to be in a container. So you're going to probably do this about every 2, I usually say 8 to 10 weeks throughout the growing season. So green leaf is my go-to. But sometimes, especially if I'm doing like a little bit of a more severe prune, maybe a prune to revive, which we'll talk about and I'll show you, then you might try Super Thrive. Super Thrive is not a fertilizer. It's not a plant food. It is a supplement. So think of it kind of like, I always use it as like kind of a steroid, for humans. If we have a rash like poison ivy, the doctor might prescribe you a steroid cream. And that's because it takes that shock off and it gets you rejuvenated real quick. Well, that's what this basically does. It's a vitamin supplement, vitamin solution that's enhanced with kelp, and Super Thrive works. Trust me, it works really, really well. So this is kind of what the bottle looks like. Small bottle, highly concentrated. They use this when they move gigantic live oaks. So great for transplanting, anything that's in shock. I always recommend this, if people are like, I'm not quite sure what's going on with my plant. I know it's not an insect, I know it's not a fungus, I'm watering correctly, it just seems like it's struggling a little bit. Give it a little bit of Super Thrive. A lot of people feed in that instance, and I recommend don't feed, because again, you're adding to that, that the plant, you're trying to make it do something that it doesn't want to do. It's trying to survive, and feeding it isn't always the answer. Sometimes it is, but Super Thrive is a great option because it's just a supplement. And you can also get it in a foliar spray form too now, so you can spray the foliage, because this will get absorbed through the foliage or through liquid or through watering. So make sure your plant is dry, needs water, and use this. It's about a teaspoon per gallon, so it goes a long way. You can add a little bit more, you can never do too much, but you can add a little bit less, and you can just mix it in with your water. Especially like bonsai growers use this a lot, because bonsais are kind of a little stressed out plant because they're kind of confined into that container. And then I always throw in our Espoma Biotone starter, especially if we're going to be replanting. So if we're going to be replanting a container, sometimes I don't recommend pruning and replanting at the same time, but sometimes I do. And I'll show you an example of that. But Biotone is a great option because it goes right to the root system, and it's got mycorrhiza and beneficial bacteria. So you got to use this at the time of planting. You can put it on the top, but the mycorrhiza and the beneficial bacteria aren't going to get to the root system as well as if you put it in the soil right up against the root system. So you really want to use this at the time of planting, but I always like to recommend it because it's a great one, and it's kind of that initial feed that you would give a plant after replanting it or transplanting it. So great options there as well. And there's a ton of different ones. There's lots and lots of different types of fertilizers and plant foods that you can use, especially for houseplants. You can get super, super specific, and you can get very general as well. We'll do a plant food kind of talk a little bit more in another webinar series coming up. So the next thing I want to talk about is, let's start pruning. So we've got 4 reasons to prune. We've got pruning for health, which is going to be the first one we're going to talk about. Then pruning to grow, to kind of generate growth, to make a plant fuller. And then pruning to shape. Sometimes we want to prune it to go in a different direction, or we might want it bushier. And then lastly is going to be prune to revive, which is always the trickiest one, right? Because pruning to revive is a little bit harder to kind of understand, and it's a little bit more severe sometimes too. So we'll get to all of those. So the first one we're going to talk about is pruning for health. So pruning for health is kind of an all the time process with houseplants. yellowing leaves, sagging leaves, leaves that have, age to them. That's even sometimes harder to kind of identify. But pruning for health is important. And you're going to do this year round. So this is not, you don't have to worry about the timing too much unless it's a severe prune. I mean, pruning for health might sound like a revival, but reviving is different. Reviving, we're going to do a little bit more severe. So pruning for health for me is taking off yellowing leaves. So see that leaf over there? It's a yellowing leaf. It's probably an older leaf, which means that it needs to come off. And why does it need to come off? Well, one, because energy is getting put into that leaf. And you'd rather go to the other healthy leaves. And by taking that leaf off, it'll help it. It'll actually encourage new growth and allow that plant to not worry about wasting energy into a bad leaf. And that's not, this could be a sign of a plant food issue, could be a sign of watering, could be a sign of a lot of things. But regardless of why it's doing it, and sometimes you might want to cut it off and bring it into the garden center to have us look at it to kind of determine what it is. But a lot of times it's just age. All plants are going to lose leaves. I always, mention a pine tree. Pine trees are evergreen, but they drop needles. If you have a pine tree, if you've ever seen a pine tree, they drop needles almost year round. So every plant, even evergreens, like our tropical indoor plants, are going to lose leaves. It's a completely natural process. So we just want to make sure that we're taking them off so that it's using that energy into producing new leaves or into the healthy leaves. So let me give you a couple examples of that real quick. So one is succulents. Succulents are very, very popular, awesome plants, completely amazing looking. I mean, look at that guy, just really, really amazing. This is Echeveria, and this one, as you can see, has some older leaves on it. So I'm going to actually show you how to revive kind of one of these in a little bit, so stay tuned for that. But this is the easy way of doing this, and typically what I tell people is take your time, figure out how you want to do it, but this one we're actually going to do with our hand most likely. Sometimes you might have to need pruners, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just gently pull up this foliage. You can see that bad leaf right there, and I'm just going to go in and we're going to pull the opposite direction, and it's going to come right off. So very, very simple, just to go around. Here's another one. So we're just going to pull up these leaves so we can get our hand in there. You can see this leaf's got a little bit of life still in it, but it's starting to decay over here. So we're just going to go in and pull the opposite direction. Usually these come off very, very easily. Now, we can keep on going. I could see maybe this one over here. You can start to see it's the color is kind of getting a little off. It's starting to get a little yellow looking. So let's go ahead and take that one off, even though it's got a lot of life in it. And we could take that one and pop it out. Now this is something that you could propagate. So I don't know a ton about propagation because propagation is really timing, but basically you want to let this harden off here, and then you're going to lay it in some soil and see if it'll root in. So really, really good option there as well, or you can just discard it. Now, Echeverias and some of these that have this kind of rosette shape are going to grow in a stalky habit. So stick around because this was once one that looked like that, right? And now it looks like this. So we'll do that when we get to the revive part. But that's an easy way of just going through and cleaning up some leaves. I could take more off if I want to look at like this. And a great solution, a great idea for succulents is to plant them in groupings, because sometimes, like the one that we're going to revive a little bit later, sometimes you're going to need to be doing some aggressive prunes. So I love seeing combinations of succulents. If you had 4 or 5 of these in a container, it'd be great. A lot of these that grow like this will grow straight up, especially if they've got good light ahead of it. If it's got more light over here, it's going to grow more towards that light. But having a combination of succulents, like one that's more of a ground cover, will help complete that container and make it look amazing. But succulents grown by themselves can look really, really good too. So a couple different options there for you. But that's how you would clean that. Snake plant, I want to talk about this. So snake plants, Sansevierias, are very commonly grown these days. This one has been, I'm not going to say neglected, but it actually needs a little bit of a drink of water is really what it needs. But I wanted to show it to you because it's got a great example. I'll say this real quick. Very difficult for me to sometimes find plants that need a lot of care here at the garden center because we do such a great job. Our employees do such an amazing job of keeping our plants clean and nice looking. And in fact, I actually had to bring some from home to show you because all of our plants here look so good. I didn't have enough examples. But I do like to recommend Sansevieria and How to Prune prune them. And there's a lot of different plants and a lot of different styles of plants. You know, like I mentioned earlier, peace lilies, aglaonemia that just send leaves out. Some that are stalky like Dracenas, different Bacchias. So there's lots and lots of different ones that, you know, you're going to run into. And if you've ever got a question like, how do I prune this specific plant, just ask us. We'll answer it for you. But sansevierias, you know, grow like a leaf, basically kind of like, you know, a peace lily, usually a stalk. So you're going to have like, you know, one kind of main stalk here, but all new leaves are going to come from the inside and keep shooting out. So you can see this new refresher leaf here in the center that just shot out. But we've got some older leaves here. And so this is a great example of this leaf doesn't look bad, but it's hanging. It's got some markings on it. It doesn't look the best. And it is on the outer edge of this center kind of piece right here, which means it's the oldest leaf for sure. We know it's the oldest leaf. So by taking this off is going to help rejuvenate and put more growth into the main portion of the plant. So, and even this one here, I just noticed. So we've got two. Let me see if I can open this up so you can see it there. So we've got two here. We've got this one over here that my pinky's touching, and then we've got this one over here. Those are two of the oldest ones. Now, here's the trick with sansevierias, because so many people have them. I want to show you this, that you can actually want to, you know, kind of feel if you can do it with your hand. If you feel like you're pulling too hard, like I feel like I am right now, then go with a pair of pruners. But we want to get it as close and down to the base as we possibly can. We don't want to leave a piece of it. If we do, it's not the end of the world. I'll show you a little bit later about what that kind of looks like if you do. But basically what I'm going to do is just try and go in and just kind of almost just get like a little bit of a tear point where I can kind of feel that leaf kind of starting to pull away, because I want to get it down as far as I possibly can. There we go. So that's what you would love to see. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. Let's say we pruned it. Let's say we did that. This is still down at the base of the plant. Over time, this will decay, but it's still got life in it, so it's still going to be putting some energy into it. So if you can get it like that, that's great. So if you can get that whole piece off, then that's really what you want. But if you end up pruning it off, that's okay. This will decay over time, and then you'll easily be able to pull it out. And I think I've got some examples I'll show you a little bit later of that. So let's do this other one over here. Let's see if we can I'm just going to kind of gently, let's see if I can show you. I'm going to kind of gently just press down, see if I can get it to pull away. Yep. So I'm just kind of pushing it in the opposite direction, and then you can kind of feel it kind of give way. And I'm kind of supporting the main stalk here. And there we go. Got it all. And that's what you want to do. So you can see this leaf was struggling, and because it's putting energy into this leaf, it'll rejuvenate and start to put new foliage out soon. So that's how you do sansevieria. Now, one other one is going to be one from my house, a peace lily. So peace lilies do this, right? Especially these larger leaf peace lilies. You know, you've got, this is common cleaning. This is me, I missed a couple waterings here and there. It was sitting in the corner. It was probably a little drafty. It was probably near a heat vent, and it just got a little dry on me, and I just didn't notice it. Nice thing about peace lilies is they pop right back to life. That's why I love growing them, because if they wilt a little bit, you can just water them and they pop right back up. But you can see that it's not bad. You know, it's got some nice foliage, really, really nice. It's got some new shoots in here, so it's really, really doing pretty well. Look at that, brand new leaf unfurling in here. So you can see that right in the inside here. Brand new leaf right there by my pointer. So it's actually doing pretty well. It just needs to be cleaned up. And this is what we need to talk about when we say pruning for health. So got a couple pieces like this that are completely brown. We're just going to go in. And I would normally say just pull it, but this one's actually a great example. This one's really got a nice little brand new leaf that's attached to it. So I'm going to try and separate it gently, and then I'm just going to take that off. There we go. So we're just going to take it off like that. Then this is a great example of if you leave a stem behind. So like I mentioned with the sansevieria, if I cut it and I leave a little piece behind, it's going to decay over time. So in here, you're going to see, and these I should be able to just pull out, kind of just pull the opposite direction. So that's where one was pruned, and then it just decayed over time. So now we can just take that and pull it out and kind of clean it up. Here's another bigger one. You can probably see that one. So you see that guy right there? So this one, old stem, got cut really, really high. I did not do a good job there. And then I can just kind of follow it down and kind of pop it out. So there we go. We've also got some broken branches. Now this might have happened in me bringing it in this morning, but That does happen over time sometimes. You know, if you've got pets or anything like that. So we're going to take this one down. I'm going to try and go as low as I possibly can. There's another brown, leftover cutting. And it's okay to cut them like that too. So we got another couple broken branches here. Here's one that's right next to a leaf that's about to unfurl. So we'll take that off. That actually was a pretty nice leaf, but it was broken. I mean, it was hinged. You can see actually where it was kind of pinched there at the bottom. And so that's going to prevent the flow of water and nutrients up to the top of the leaf, which is going to cause problems over time. So we're going to want to make sure to take those off. There's another one. And then let's see, I got one more here that's really kind of broken. And this is a nice one to take off because this is an older leaf. So this one I can go down pretty deep and get it as low as I possibly can. You can see where it bent, but it also was not a very good looking leaf. It was missing a portion, it's got some dotting on it, things like that. So one more over here. There we go. Take that one off. All right, so now that I've kind of taken off the broken ones, I've got one more stem in here that's an older decaying one. So we're going to kind of really get in here and just kind of clean this thing out. We really want to make it look very, very nice and kind of pruning for health, pruning to clean up, and just kind of getting into that little bit of that kind of, I always like to say, getting into a little bit of a zen moment there to just kind of enjoy your plant. All right, so now that I've gotten the kind of stuff from the bottom off, the broken branches, the hanging ones, the ones that I could tell were old, then we want to look at the top. Because you can see in here, I've got a couple brown tips. I've got one that's really browning pretty bad. And some people might say, well, could this be a fungus? It could be. And what you can do is you can disinfect your pruners. I know it's not a fungus. This was just due to me not watering. But if you're thinking it could be a fungal issue and you want to prune it anyways, disinfect your pruners after each prune. And what that means is just take some rubbing alcohol. You can even use mouthwash. You can use a fungicide. But basically, you just want to wipe the cutting blades. And so what I like to do is have a little cup, dip a rag into it. Especially, you can use bleach as well. But typically, I like rubbing alcohol. Rubbing alcohol works best. It's very, very simple. It's easy. The plants don't tend to mind it at all. So I'll put it on a rag and I'll just wipe off my blades, and that'll kill any fungus that might be on there. So that's one option for you as you're pruning if you think you might have a fungal issue. So there's the bad leaf. And this could be even maybe like a little bit considered like pruning for revival, pruning to revive, but this is really pruning for health because this plant will still look really nice. Sometimes when we prune to revive, the plant doesn't look as nice after we do it. Okay, so here's another option for you, and I'll show you because here's a great example of something. Be careful when you're pruning not to take off too much. Something that you might want to consider is, are there going to be new leaves? So a great example here is this leaf right here. So this leaf right here, it's got a brown tip on the end of it. It's not super unsightly. It doesn't look horrible. It's just got one little brown tip due to me missing a watering. But when I look inside, and if we follow that leaf down, let's see if you can see it. So here's the leaf right here. And right here is a new leaf that's coming out. So if I take this, I could cut it up here, but it's gonna have a long brown stalk, and this one is helping support this new leaf coming out. So I really wanna let this new leaf come out before I take it off. So what I can do is I can take my houseplant shears, just because I wanna make it look nice. Maybe I've got company coming over, and I'm just gonna take that leaf, and I'm just gonna kind of cut that tip off. Now, what's gonna happen, you don't have to do this, but you can, but what's gonna happen is it's gonna get a little bit of a scarring here on the outer edge, where it's gonna heal up that cut, which is perfectly fine. But this will give that leaf just a little bit of a nicer, fresher look, so it doesn't look as bad, and it'll allow that new leaf to unfurl before I have to take it off. So it's not going to give it, a ton of time, but it will make it look nice and clean and tidy for you if you're having people over and you don't want some of those brown leaves on your plants. So here we got another one. Follow it down, take it off. And the nice thing about peace lilies too is they're constantly sending out new growth. So if you took this even harder and I took a lot more off of it, then it would be perfectly fine. But I'm going to leave it right there, and then I'll probably come back. I got one more little one over here that's an old leaf that has a little bit of a brown tip. So I'm going to leave it right there, let it be. I don't want to take off too much. It's still, depending on the timing of the year, I want to make sure that it's got enough time to regenerate some new growth. It's got new leaves already coming out. I see about 5 or 6 new leaves coming out. Let those come out, and then I'll go back in and prune again for health. Pruning to kind of clean it up. So very, very easy process. All right, so the next one is pruning to grow. So pruning to grow sounds kind of like, somewhat made up, but what I'm talking about here is pruning to make your plant grow in a different shape, or pruning to make it grow fuller. A lot of times, especially like look at that Swiss cheese philodendron over there. So that long tendril that's coming down. And some people like that look. I have one and I love the fact that it looks like that. I want it, it's up high, I want it to trail down the bookcase. So that's perfectly fine. But some people might want it bushy but are fearful of pruning it. But it's really, really simple to do. So a lot of times we're going to talk about vining plants when we're talking about pruning to grow. But you can do it with a lot of different things, especially like a ficus. Like this one right here next to me. We'll talk about that here in a minute. So a tip pruning is a great option to kind of prune, to kind of shape it a little bit, but also pruning to grow. So we'll talk about some of those options here for you as well. All right, so let's talk about the vines. Vines are always the most common one that I kind of run into when we talk about pruning to grow. So I've got this great big ivy here. Let me get this down, and you can see all of these long vines, which are great. If I wanted to hang this on a bookcase, it would be amazing. But maybe they're just getting too long, they're getting too unruly, and I think people get worried about taking them off. But it's really not a bad process to take them off, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So this one is a nice, not super long one, but then I've got all these over here, and they are very, very long. I mean, we're talking almost 4 or 5 feet of vine here. So what I want to do is I want to kind of make it symmetrical a little bit. So this is a little bit of that to shape and a little bit of that to grow. I want it to fill out here. I want this one to be bushy. Maybe I'm going to take the hanger off and use it in a pot. So maybe there's lots of different reasons that we do it. But vining plants are going to continue to trail down, or they're going to grow on a trellis. But if we keep on pruning them, they're just going to keep on sending out growth out of this top portion here. So very, very simple way to do this. And what you want to do is find the right place to prune. So let's get one of these vines separated out so we can show you. So this is a long run here. Now, I could take this and just prune off the bottom here, and it'll send out some new growth from out here somewhere. But I always tell people prune a little bit aggressively, because when you prune into a thicker piece of wood, a thicker piece of vine, you're going to get more growth and a more vigorous growth out of it. So just taking off a little tiny piece isn't going to encourage a lot of growth. Now, every plant grows from a terminal bud, which means that bud right here is going to keep on growing out. It's going to keep on slowly but surely growing, and it'll send out some new branching here and there. But if we take that terminal bud off, then it's going to regenerate growth back inside, and it's going to put out a lot more branching a lot faster. So what I'm going to do with this one is actually come back. I'm going to kind of measure it against this one, and I'm going to come back a little bit further. Now, where do we prune? So I always want to prune just after a leaf node. And what that means is like this leaf right here, I think that's probably going to be the spot, because this one's kind of a weird leaf. It's kind of curling back up. So I'm going to take this one and prune it right at the end of that leaf bud, and I'm going to put a little bit of an angle on it. So you can see there, and then put a little bit of an angle. So it comes to a little bit of a point. And the reason I do that is just because if water happens to collect on it, it's not a flat surface. So it just gets you in the mode of never doing that. Always pruning with a little bit of an angle, so that if water droplets sit on it, it falls off. If it's flat, water droplets can sit on it, and then you can run into fungus issues. But you can see I pruned it a little bit shorter than this one, and that's because I want it to regenerate growth, and it's going to grow probably pretty vigorously. Now I really want it to come back into here so I could prune it even tighter if I wanted to, but we'll just do a couple more here. So here's another long one. I'm going to find a leaf that I like, that I feel good about. And this is also a good way of kind of telling too, is you can kind of look at the stem. So this is obviously older wood, starts to get a little bit thinner right in here. I like this leaf. This leaf looks really nice and healthy. So we're gonna go right after that leaf bud and prune on an angle. Super, super simple. Let's do one more. So we've got that one. I'm gonna come back in, and I like to keep it somewhat variable. I don't want it to be like too cookie cutter. I don't want to make it look like a haircut, like a bowl cut, like you just walk up to it and just chop it off. So we'll just take it and cut that off. And there we go. And I'm going to leave it there. I'll probably finish it up but that is basically what we're going to end up with. So we're going to take all these and prune them to here, so we got this nice bushy full plant, because some people like that look. Some people want the vine, that's perfectly fine. Some people want that nice bushy look. So pruning to grow is a great way of doing that. All right, let's see, I had another one. Oh yeah, so I mentioned the ficus. So we've got this big ficus tree right here. This one looks great. And I could prune this if I wanted to. I could prune it to shape, or I could prune it to grow, but I want to explain a tip pruning for you so that you can kind of understand that idea. Because one, this is kind of where we're going to kind of blur the lines a little bit, because we're pruning to grow, but we're also pruning to shape. So I'm going to do a bonsai kind of thing here over here. I've got one over here that's going to be kind of cool. This is another ficus ginseng. So we'll do a little bit of kind of bonsai look, but pruning to a tip pruning is a great way to grow. It's really used a lot outdoors. So we think of like, a head shear on a bush. So if we're going to take a boxwood or a holly, we're going to prune it to shape it. We're also pruning it to grow, because we're taking all those tips off. Like I mentioned, that terminal bud. So this is a ficus. This is the Benji Daniel. So this is Danielle, sorry. So this is a really nice one, and you can see you can do a couple different things with this. We could take it, I actually brought it for two reasons. One, I could take all this foliage off the bottom and I can make it into a small tree, or we can continue to fill it out. And the reason I bring that up is because we've got these arching branches up here. And that means that they're going to start to kind of shade all this, and this is going to start to get thinner. But if we want to take it and kind of make it nice and full, we want to do a tip pruning to allow it to kind of bush out. So we're going to do a little bit of that real quick. I'll show you how to do that. So these are your longer tips here, terminal buds, they're going to grow from there. So I just want to kind of look at it, and I want to kind of find a good place to tip prune this. So here I've got actually another little branch coming out. So if I cut it here, before this branch shoot, then it's going to continue to just grow from this branch, really. It's going to kind of say, this is my new terminal bud, and it's going to continue to grow from there. So I'm actually going to want to take that off as well and come back to another joint here, another leaf node, cut on an angle, and it also allows me to cut into a little bit thicker wood. So you can see there how that branch was. If I took it and pruned it there, then it's going to grow from here. Now that's a great way to direct your plants in certain directions if you want it to go in a certain direction, but that's how I typically tip prune, is a little bit harder back so that I get that nice fuller growth. So we'll do another one over here, and you can see this kind of top kind of umbrella fashion is going to come back into shape a little bit. And there we go. So 3 little tiny prunes on that guy, and I got it nice back into shape. And what that's going to allow is more sunlight into here. And what I will do over time is, if this starts to grow, if I'm hoping that it starts to get a little bit fuller and starts to fill out, I want this to be a bushy ficus, then I might take and prune that off too, to allow it to fill out underneath. So pruning to grow is another very important reason to do it. Now, with that, pruning to shape, because that's kind of what we were doing there. We're kind of pruning to make it regrow, to make it grow in a different fashion, but also pruning to shape it in time. So I think a lot of people think bonsai, but it could just be like this ficus right here. Just taking it back because maybe it's gotten some branches that are kind of shooting out, and we could just take and clip it back. I'm not going to do that today, but basically if you wanted to make this a nice tight kind of almost topiary ball, you can do that. You're just going to tip prune it back, and that's pruning to shape. You're not necessarily doing it because you want it to grow any more aggressively, but you're doing it because you want it to kind of shape into a nice kind of round shape. So that's how we prune and grow. But I think a lot of people, when they think of shape, is kind of changing the look of your plant. So I think a lot of people think of bonsai when we talk about that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab actually these houseplant shears, because they're a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to work with. And really bonsai, it's a bigger topic than I can probably give you right now. But I think the most important part is making it enjoyable to you when it comes to working with bonsais or working with a tree and forming something into a tree. I think it's got a lot to do with like triangles and different things like that. But for me, it's always been, I want to see this habit. Like, look at this really cool trunk on this ficus. So it's got this really nice kind of contorted kind of trunk that kind of binds together here. But I start to lose some of that interior look here. And so that's all we're going to do, is we're going to go in and kind of thin it out a little bit and kind of maybe do a little bit of tip pruning to encourage that kind of spreading growth. But we'll definitely try and open this up because I want to be able to see this, and this has gotten bushy with a lot of smaller, weaker growth. We've got some dominant pieces here. Those are good. We want to take out some of the smaller, weaker stuff. So basically all I'm going to do is just go in here, and I want to get as close as I possibly can to this trunk, just so I can get a nice clean cut on it. So all I'm doing here is just taking out some of this weaker wood. And I say weaker wood, I mean just smaller pieces. We're going to keep the big pieces. So we're just going to work through this. Let's see if I can get in here. I'm going to try. I'm actually going to use my houseplant or household shears for this, because really these are almost just like leaves in here. It's a really tender growth. So we don't need anything super, super sharp. We just need to be able to get into there with fine point. You know what would work perfect with this? It's probably bonsai shears, one, but these would work really, really well. These dram kind of pointed ones would work really well. But we'll use these houseplant shears because I got them open. All right, so let's see. We'll keep taking a little bit of this tiny stuff out. I'm going to try and turn this and see if I can, now that I've opened it up a little bit, so you can kind of see it a little bit better. All right, now ficus do have that kind of white sticky sap that come out of them sometimes, so you can start to see that kind of, coming out as it starts to heal up itself. That's normal, so it's completely fine. It doesn't bother me, so if you're worried about it, obviously wear gloves. But you can see where I've opened all this up. This was all foliage. I might even take this leaf off, just because I'm really trying to expose this interior habit here. So I'm really trying to get a look inside to kind of make it, into that kind of tree look that we all kind of desire and look for. So we're going to take off some of this. Oh, there's small growth here. See if I can turn this so you can see a little bit better. And then I've got some other great example here, a little tiny growth inside that's really just kind of getting swallowed up by the main portion here. So we'll take off some of these leaves. Some of this, if it's tender enough, you can do it with your hands. So just trying to open it up. And this is where I love, this is where you can kind of get into that kind of zen moment and kind of, take your time, no major rush, prune one day, let it sit for another day, and then you can start to see how that habit just opens up. Now I can see inside, I can see through it, and then what I'll do is probably just take a little bit off the top just to kind of give it that little tip pruning. So we'll go, actually I'm gonna go a little bit lower here. So we're gonna bring that back to just above everything else. And then I'm going to take this one and prune it just a little bit higher. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to have some different height and different variation in my plant. I don't want it to be super, super cookie cutter. I want it to kind of grow in a different fashion. But by taking off that terminal bud, we will get a different growth habit. We'll get more branching inside here. And eliminating this branching and tip pruning here is going to encourage growth throughout this entire top portion, and then we can start to expand that out and do different things with it. So really, really simple way of kind of doing bonsai, but really to shape, because sometimes, like this ficus here, you're probably like, he must love ficus, but ficus are great for showing pruning because it's a little bit easier to kind of see inside of them and do different things. And for shape, this is a really cool one. This is that variegated, I think, triangulars. So this one's a really nice one. It's also got some branches here that you can see are kind of starting to defoliate a little bit. They don't have a whole lot of leaves. They're on the bottom portion. The top portion is starting to shade that, which means it's not getting as much sunlight, and therefore it's not going to grow as aggressively. So I could take this and prune the top back to try and allow sunlight there. It's a much longer process. It's more on the revival style. But I can also take it and prune it into this small little kind of, I got 3 stems here. I can make this kind of a cool looking tree. So that's what I'm going to do. We'll just take this and we're going to take off some of these lower branches. Now this one's cool because it's coming out. It's trying to find the light, but I got a couple weak wood pieces in here. So we're just going to thin this out just a little bit, and that's how I'm going to do that one. We'll turn it and we'll do this to the other one. So this one's a little bit bigger, but kind of cool. Remember, when pruning, you can't put it back on. So make sure you're wanting to prune it before you take it off. Make sure sometimes I'll pull it away and just kind of, look at it without it. So like this one's a tough one. This one's a big branch, but it's only got a few leaves on the outer edge there. So it's probably just gonna come off. I think we're gonna take that one off. And then this one over here is really coming out far. It's a big branch. You know, it's got a lot of leaves on it. This one not so much, but this one looks pretty good. I think I'm gonna leave that, but I am gonna do a tip prune on it. So we're gonna take it and we're just gonna tip it just to bring it back in to this kind of tighter shape here. And then we'll do the last branch here. And I see a question there from John. Can you cut back snake plants? I showed an example of how you can do that earlier, and that was really more for cleaning. For cutting it back specifically, we don't want to, you don't want to top it necessarily. I'll pull my snake plant back out and show you in a second, John. But this one's kind of funky. I don't know that I want to take it all the way off, so I'm going to tip prune this one and bring that back in, and we'll see if that regenerates some growth. And there we go. So now we've got a nice, clean kind of tree form Ficus triangularis. So really, really cool one. So that's nice. So you can do it that way. So pruning the shape is an important one. So John, to answer your question on the snake plant, so what you don't want to do is take and just cut a snake plant like this. Same kind of thing that I was just showing on the peace lily when we were talking about cleaning it. If I've got a leaf that's got like a burnt tip or a bad tip or something like that, and I want to just take it off because I don't want it to look like that, it's going to scar if I cut it up here. It's going to put a little bit of a white scar on the top of my leaf. So wherever I cut it, it's going to scar it a little bit. But you don't want to just chop it like that, because it could possibly send out a new shoot, but typically if your crown or your centerpiece goes, then it's not going to come back, because that's where the next leaf is going to come out of. So what you want to do is what I was showing earlier, which was basically taking whole leaves out. So I've got this leaf that was old and hanging out the side like that, and we just went in and took the whole portion of it out. So that's what I typically recommend when you're talking about pruning or taking care of a Sansevieria snake plant. But John, if you want to prune it back, I would recommend not doing that, not topping it by cutting it back. What you could do is take some of the larger stems out. Maybe you just need to put it in a different location and find another plant for that spot that grows a little bit shorter in stature if it's gotten too tall for you. All right. So let's see. The next one we're going to talk about is planting to revive. So this is the hardest one. Planting to revive is the hardest one because we're talking about doing some major pruning here. So we're talking about doing some bigger cuttings, and these are things that you definitely want to make sure that we're doing at the right time and with the right tools, and then maybe we're going to feed it or use Super Thrive afterwards. So planting or pruning to revive is a huge subject, because a lot of us have plants that maybe struggle and we think that a hard prune would probably help, and it could. So let's talk about that succulent that I showed earlier. So this one was growing like this in a pot, straight up. I could stake it like this if I wanted to, or maybe I want these guys to grow. So these little babies down here will grow. If I take this and I cut this here, you can't just stick that in soil and grow. So I'm gonna do it because you need to kind of just bite the bullet sometimes and do these things. What I wanted to do is grow back from the base here. So I've got all this new growth down here. It's obviously gonna wanna do that. So I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna cut it back first here. So I know that's hard to do sometimes, but you just got to do it. I think a lot of people think I can take all of this growth off, which is very much like you can do with the Dracena, and I can stick this into a pot of soil and it's going to be perfectly fine and grow just like that again, just like I originally bought it, but it's probably not. So what you can do is you can take off some of these babies, or you can take off a leaf. So I could take this leaf and try and propagate it from there. But typically what I would say is let this be your new plant. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually do another prune. So I'm going to take it even further down, just like that. So now all of these new pieces are going to form a new plant. And so all of it's going to fill in. It's going to fill in nice and full. And the reason it is because it's now not supporting this, and it's got this root system down here that's big enough to support a bigger plant. So it's going to produce a bigger plant. It's going to produce it right here. It's going to be multi-stem this time instead of just a single stem. So now what I can do with that piece that I took off is I can go and take some of these little babies off. So now I can take that, and that I can plant. So that I can just lay right on the top of a soil, and that'll regenerate and grow because it's a young little baby. So easy way, hard to do sometimes, but sometimes you got to do it to help encourage your plant, which is why I mentioned earlier, if you're planting succulents and you don't want to prune them, you don't want to cut them back, maybe you don't want to lose a big piece like this guy, then I would recommend planting them in combos, because then you don't have to worry about it as much, because you got different things doing different things and kind of covering up, the areas for other things. All right, so the next one I want to show you Let's see, where was my other revival? Oh, that's right. I want to show you a little example. So about a year ago, we did a similar video about pruning houseplants. So it was very, very similar setup. We're kind of doing a little bit of a redo here. But the reason I wanted to do a redo is because I wanted to show you this major revival that I did to my Dracena from home. So this is a Dracena. You can see this is literally last year. And you can see that it was struggling, I'll be honest. I had it outside one summer. I didn't take very good care of it, but it was still kind of growing. It had new growth coming out of it. I really wanted to revive it, and I really wanted to see about cutting the stalk off and propagating it and reviving it that way. So it was a lot of fun to do. So I'm gonna kind of show you a step-by-step, and then I'll show you the finished product that I've got almost a year later. So I did this, I think, around February of 2022. It's now, middle to end part of January of 2023, so it's literally been 11 months since I've done this. So what I did there was I took off all the leaves first, all those bad leaves. You can kind of see where some of those leaves are a little bit kind of scarred, broken, yellowing, and Dracenas are easy. You can just pull those lower leaves off. Then I had the clean plant. Now, this was a two stalk plant. It literally had 2 stalks, and they were super, super tall. That was the only place that had good growth on them, because you can see it like coming off the top of the screen up there. That it's really, really tall and funky looking. So this was hard. I had to cut these off. So you can see where my fingers were, and that's where I wanted to cut it. And what I was trying to do was create stalks. So I was trying to create these 3-tiered, 5-tiered, 4-tiered effect. So it's kind of a little bit of thinking through that about where you cut. But once you think about it, then this is what I ended up with. And if you can see, I had one piece that was low and in the front. I had one in the middle that was a little bit taller, and then the 2 on the sides that were even taller. So basically 4 tiers. So I had a low in the front, high in the middle, and then even higher on the side, and then the highest on the other side. So obviously it looked weird because the pieces that I cut off on the top had come down and been stuck into the soil. At this time, I also replanted it. So at the same time that I was cutting these stalks off, cutting them in half, cutting them a third off, I was also repotting it to add a little bit of soil so that I could stick those stalks in. So I was upgrading the container just a little bit, which adds another shock level to it. But those main stalks that I cut off the tops of, they've got an established root system. They're gonna be perfectly fine. They just don't have any leaves on them. And of course, doing this at the proper time is important. So I did this right before spring was coming, and I knew that I was gonna start getting those longer days and those warmer days, so I knew that I'd be okay. And then it was just getting them to root in the pieces that actually had the greenery. So fast forward 11 months later, this is what we've got. This is my Dracena. So you can see it regenerated growth. So what's cool about this is some Dracenas, especially when you start them from the original. So you can see right there, there's the original top. It's just got one stalk. Leaves are gonna keep coming from the center here. This one actually had a weird kind of split on it when I planted it. So I kept it, and it's still doing well. The nice thing too is I can pull on it and I can tell it's rooted in. Here's the other one. So these were the tops. These 2 pieces, this one and this one, were on top of here. And I cut them off and I stuck them down here. What I got was the different height that I wanted. So I got this fuller plant. So now I've got this nice lower section. I've got a little bit taller, and the tallest. But what I want to show you was where I cut, it breaks. And this is a great example of what I was mentioning earlier with that terminal bud. When you take off the terminal bud, sometimes you're going to get more breakage. You're going to get more growth. Now here I didn't get it. And the reason I didn't get it, and I realized this later, was because I had it on a window side, and the window was over here. So it was facing this way, so I only got growth this direction. And sometimes that happens, and I'm perfectly fine with that. So it's just got this little bit of this kind of turn, and then it comes up. But this piece on the top, this one broke twice, and it's actually breaking a 3rd time over here. So I've got this little tiny bud over here. But you can see here that I've got now 2 stalks here that are gonna grow side by side, which is gonna be really nice because it's gonna really fill out up here. So in just a year, I've got a nice plant that now I can showcase, and this is gonna fill in over here this year, and it's gonna look really, really nice. So I'm really excited about this. If I made one error, I know exactly what I did. So when I replanted it, I used my biotone starter, which was great, and it really hit the ground running. And then I used Super Thrive because it's one of my favorite things to use. So then I used Super Thrive to kind of take the shock off of it. But guess what I forgot to do? I forgot to use Greenleaf. So I forgot to use a real traditional plant food that was going to give it the nutrients and the energy that it needed. And what I see is those original stalks are nice and dark and green, but the new ones are a little bit limey green. Now that could be because they haven't hardened off, they haven't been around for long enough. These probably shot out right around, so these were the pieces that I cut, so they had no leaves on them. So these came out probably, I would say it was probably 2 to 3 months later is when they started to shoot back out. But I didn't feed it, so I never really gave it a lot of nutrients. So that'll be my game plan this year, is to give it the nutrients that it needs and really fill it out, keep it watered, keep it happy. I might give it a summer vacation just to see if I can really boost the growth out of it. That's a great tip for houseplants, is if you really need to kind of give it a boost. Indoor plants, I always say Mother Nature didn't create indoor plants, we did. So none of these plants want to necessarily grow in your house, but some of them can, and in different light conditions they can grow very, very well. But a lot of them want humidity, and our houses aren't humid. But our outdoor conditions can be nice and humid. So taking them on a summer vacation when they're growing onto a front porch, make sure they're put in a shaded area, because even if it's like a Dracena or some of the plants that need that higher light, like a ficus, if you take those from a full sun or a bright light area in your home directly out into full sun outside, they'll burn them up. So you always want to kind of start it in some shade, and you can work it towards a little bit more light, but typically outdoors, a front porch is a great place. Something that's got a little bit of cover to it, a little bit of afternoon sun or a little bit of morning sun, that'll be perfectly fine. It's really just going to love the temperature and that humidity level, and then you're going to have to water it a little bit more in those conditions. But that's what I think I'll probably do this year. And we'll see what it looks like next year. It really turned out well. I actually had 2 of them, so I did another one. And it was really cool to see that you can revive a plant very, very easily just by diving in and kind of going for it. I was always worried about what would I do if I pruned it. Now I know. Came back out, put lots of new growth out, looks great, and my 2 cuttings rooted in nice and tight. So Dracenas are great because they're very, very versatile, very easy plants to grow, so I felt pretty safe about that. But some of the other ones, you just want to talk to your garden center experts to kind of determine if that's something that you should do or attempt. So that's how you revive a plant. Sometimes it can be kind of shocking and hard to kind of dive in and do, but I definitely recommend if it's a plant that you are worried about, bring a picture in, let us look at it, and talk about it, kind of figure out, learn from other people's mistakes is what I say. We're all going to make them. That's part of gardening. But learn from other people's mistakes, and I think it'll help you out in the long run. All right, let me get to some of these questions before we end up here. So definitely want to say hi to Diana, watching from Chesapeake. And then John, thank you for the question. Great question. And then let's see. We had Roberta saying, watching from Norfolk. Thanks, Roberta. Thank you for thinking it's very interesting. I'm glad. And then Anna said, will they maintain the same rosette shape the babies pruned off the neck of the echeveria? Yes, they will. And in fact, I don't know if I showed you very close, but these are very rosette shaped. Sorry, I got 2 screens up. All right, so these are very much rosette shaped. You can kind of see that there. So that little plant right there will definitely, now, what will happen, Anna, is over time, is this will get stalky, just like the original one did. So you can stake it to keep it up, make sure you're getting good bright light, turning the container so that it stays nice and vertical, just like this guy here. So if we want to keep it like this and we're okay with it getting stalky, that's fine. But also by taking these little guys, you could put multiple of these in a pot, but yes, they will definitely grow in a rosette shape. Let's see, so Jenny said, love watching you, so knowledgeable. I am very interested in natives. Will you be talking about natives in the future? So yeah, we do talk about natives. We kind of talk about it kind of consistently. So as we get into the spring season, we'll talk more and more about outdoor plants, perennials specifically, especially pollinator week. We talk a lot about native plants because that's what helps the bees and the butterflies. So Jenny, yes, we will definitely talk about it more. I don't know if we'll do a specific whole webinar on it. We'll have to see, but definitely keep tuned in, and I'm glad that you're enjoying them. And we might do one on natives if that's a topic that can come up. But we do kind of I always encourage organic gardening and natives and things that protect, our waterways, all of those things are great, and we definitely need to be doing more of them. But it all works into our everyday gardening experiences as well. So we definitely try and encourage that in everything we do. If somebody comes in and says I have an insect issue, then I'm always saying to them, this is one solution. This is our traditional solution, but this is an organic solution. I give them both options because one might work a little bit better than the other, but you definitely have the ability to make that option, and there's lots of organic solutions, there's lots of native plants, so we definitely encourage those. I always talk about it when I do like my mold and mold class. Now it's an organic, completely safe thing, completely safe for pets, so we always try and encourage that whenever we're doing anything with our gardening experience. So Jenny, stay tuned, and we'll see if maybe we can do a truly native class in the future. So stick around for that. All right, everybody, I had a lot of fun doing this. Pruning plants can be really, really enjoyable, and it's a fun experience to do, and it kind of gets you in the mode for kind of continuing that gardening success, keeping your plants healthy, encouraging them to grow, shaping them into a different specimen, or reviving them if they've been around for a long time and they're struggling a little bit. Let us help you with any of those. I hope you all enjoy this. We hope to see you here in the Garden Center, and have a great day, everybody. Bye.